North Atlantic, March 1944. The sea was calm. Too calm. Inside German submarine U-521. The air tasted of metal diesel fumes and the stale breath of 50 exhausted men who had not seen sunlight in 12 days. The Atlantic was supposed to be their hunting ground, a place where German U-boats ruled by fear and silence. But on this night, silence felt wrong, artificial, like something was waiting in the dark below the surface. Oberleutnant Klaus Barston, the boat's 29-year-old executive officer, stood in the control room studying the depth gauge. It was steady, normal, but the uneasy feeling in his stomach wasn't. Then he heard it, a faint vibration, a tremor in the hull, barely perceptible, but real. He looked toward the hydrophone operator. The operator froze, and then he whispered words Barston would never forget. "Sir, I'm hearing screws. Many screws." The moment fear replaced confidence. U-boat doctrine said that if you heard propeller noise, you were too close already. But what Barston heard next was something no manual had ever prepared him for. Not one ship, not two, 5 distinct propeller signatures. And beneath them, a deeper tone, a low, slow, powerful rhythm the hydrophones had never picked up before. The operator swallowed hard. Her Oberleutnant, that second signature. It's an aircraft carrier. Barston felt his blood run cold. A carrier? Here? In the middle of the Atlantic? Impossible. Carriers defended convoys. Carriers stayed close to friendly naval bases. Carriers didn't roam the open ocean. Unless this wasn't a convoy escort. Unless this was something else. The submarine that suddenly became the hunted. For years, U-boats had been predators. They attacked merchant ships under cover of darkness. They slipped beneath destroyers. They stalked supply lines as wolves stalk wounded prey. But now, in the quiet darkness of the Atlantic, Barston realized something had changed. The enemy was not defending. The enemy was hunting. What ships? Barston demanded. The operator adjusted the dials with trembling fingers. 5 fast-moving escorts, destroyers, I think. They're sweeping. A wide pattern. And the carrier? Definitely an escort carrier. Small, but sir, it's coming directly toward us. Barston stared at the wooden paneling of the control room, old varnish peeling under salt moisture. For the first time in the war, U-521 wasn't listening to the ocean. It was listening to its own death. The crew reacts. One by one, heads lifted, breathing changed. The steel coffin of U-521 seemed to pull tighter around them. A mechanic whispered, "But they're not escorting anything." Exactly. That was the problem. Destroyers don't roam the ocean unless they're feeding off a supply line. Carriers don't operate alone unless they know exactly where the enemy is. And this group, whatever it was not moving like a defensive formation. It was moving with purpose. Toward them. The new American strategy, unknown to Germany. Barston didn't know it then, but he was hearing something completely new. A U.S. hunter-killer group. A floating execution squad designed not to protect ships, but to eradicate submarines. Back in Washington, American admirals had already accepted a brutal truth. You don't win the Atlantic by saving convoys. You win it by eliminating the predators. The U.S. industrial machine had made this possible. Destroyers could be replaced. Carriers could be replaced. Aircraft could be replaced. U-boats could not. But U-521 had no idea this shift had occurred. To them, this sound in the hydrophones was not strategy. It was death. A shape moves in the void. The hydrophone operator jerked his headset off. "Sir!" The carrier, it just changed course. Barston turned sharply. "How much?" 40 degrees. It's turning toward us." The crew stared at one another. How? How could the Americans know? Radio silence had been perfect. They were hundreds of miles from any convoy. U-521 had not surfaced in over 36 hours. This was supposed to be safe water. Dead water. But now 5 destroyers and an escort carrier were converging on their exact position. The captain entered the room. "What's happening?" Barston answered quietly. They're hunting us, her captain. The captain frowned. No, they can't know we're here. But the hydrophone operator whispered. They know. The sound that broke the crew. Then came the sound that froze every man on U-521. Ping. A single sharp pulse. Artificial. Metallic. Synthetic. Sonar. Not defensive sonar. Search sonar. Another ping. The operator gasped. Ping. 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 The rhythm quickened. They weren't sweeping the ocean anymore. They were triangulating. Tracking. Closing in. The captain's voice, normally stern and unshakable, broke as he gave the only order possible. Flood negative tanks. Take us down. Silent running now. Lights dimmed. Engines slowed. The submarine began sinking into the black. But everyone aboard knew the truth. They were too late. The hunter had already found the wolf. The first explosion. The submarine had barely reached 70 meters when it happened. A deep, thunderous boom rolled to the hull, followed by a pressure wave so violent that every man instinctively grabbed the nearest pipe or railing. Dust rained from ceiling bolts. Light bulbs flickered. A metal cup shattered on the floor. The chief engineer shouted, "Depth charge. Close." Before the words reached the bow, the second one detonated. Boom, boom, boom. 3 explosions, each closer, each sharper, each sending a spike of fear to the steel coffin that held 50 men and their hopes of staying alive. Barston steadied himself on the navigation table, his knuckles white. Silent running was pointless now. The Americans had them. The realization they were not facing a destroyer, but a system. Destroyers were dangerous. Swarms of destroyers were deadly. But a hunter-killer group? This was something else entirely. It was not a random patrol, not a lucky detection, not a convoy escort acting aggressively. It was an organized machine built with one purpose: find the submarine, fix its location, crush it. 5 destroyers fanned into a formation above U-521, creating a lattice of sonar beams that left the boat no escape. And at the rear of the formation, a ship they had once considered impossible here. An escort carrier, a floating airfield, a silent reminder of American industry, a symbol that the battlefield had changed. When the third pattern hits, the real fear begins. Depth charges, when described on paper, sound like mechanical tools. In reality, they are underwater earthquakes designed to kill by pressure, not shrapnel. Your lungs collapse before the hull does. The third pattern detonated at 110 meters. The boat groaned, a deep, tortured metal moan that every submariner fears. Pipes burst. Panels shook loose. A gauge shattered and sprayed Barston's sleeve with oil and glass. A seaman screamed, not in pain, in raw, primal terror. The captain barked. Maintain depth, silence. But the submarine was losing buoyancy. The depth gauge climbed. 120 m, 123 m, 125 m, 127 m. Every creak sounded like the beginning of the end. The sonar's cruel music. Ping, ping, ping. The pings were calm, rhythmic, almost polite. It was the politeness of a predator that knows you cannot run. The sonar operator whispered, "They're adjusting position. They're correcting our depth." Another officer realized, "They're not guessing, they're tracking." American sonar crews had improved beyond anything Germany expected. They were faster, more precise, better trained, and there were too many of them. The carrier enters the game. Suddenly, a new sound appeared. Lighter, sharper, faster. Propellers, smaller ones. Aircraft. The escort carrier was launching ASW planes. Barston's heart sank. Aircraft? This far out. Aircraft meant sonobuoys. Sonobuoys meant triangulation. Triangulation meant perfect location. These planes were not searching for a shadow. They were following a signal. The pilot overhead sent a message to the destroyers. Subcontact confirmed. Hold your grid. And next came the sound no submarine crew ever wants to hear. A pattern of splashes. The Americans weren't dropping bombs. They were dropping technology. floating ears that would fix you. 521 in the water, like pins to a map. The world above them is no longer a battlefield. It's a factory line. Another depth charge pattern detonated. This time, closer than ever. The submarine tilted sharply. Men tumbled. A pipe ruptured and sprayed freezing seawater across the control room. Barston caught himself on the chart table. Around him, he saw the fear on the faces of the crew. Fear he hadn't seen in years. Not because of the destroyers. Not because of the aircraft. But because they all sense the same truth. Germany could no longer match this. The Americans weren't using superior tactics. They weren't winning because of individual skill. They were winning because they had built more ships, more aircraft, more sonar stations, more everything. American factories were winning the battle of the Atlantic, the deepest dive. "Take us down to 160 meters, the captain ordered. "No," the chief engineer shouted. "The hull is rated to 150. The captain stared him down. "A depth charge is rated to kill us at 120. Down." The boat creaked as it descended. 140 m, 145 m, 148 m. Every bolt felt like it was seconds from shearing. 149 m, 150 m, 151 m. The hull vibrated like a living organism in pain. Men held their breath. The submarine reached 154 meters and stabilized. For the first time in 10 minutes, the depth gauge stopped climbing. For a brief moment, everyone thought, maybe they lost us. Then, ping, right above them. The hunter-killer group had adjusted depth exactly. They hadn't lost you, 521. They were tightening the noose. The crew begins to break. A young sailor began crying silently. Another muttered prayers. Another stared at the steel wall, waiting for it to implode. Barston gripped the side rail, trying to steady himself. He'd faced British destroyers. He'd eluded Canadian escorts. He'd slipped past aircraft from Gibraltar. But this was different. The Americans weren't chasing a submarine. They were executing a procedure. This wasn't war. This was manufacturing. Industrialized destruction. And you, 521, had become a defective unit on their assembly line. The pressure of the deep. At 154 meters, you, 521, was no longer a machine. It was a groaning, screaming steel animal, fighting to stay alive against the crushing weight of the Atlantic. The hull vibrated with the sound of metal under stress. Rivets creaked. Panels bulged. Every man felt it in his bones. One more depth charge. One more mechanical failure. One more meter downward, and the entire submarine would implode like an egg under a boot. Barston whispered, "Hold together, bit hold." The lights flickered again. The boat felt as if it were breathing, contracting and expanding under pressure, a steel lung fighting the ocean itself. The sonar that never stopped. Ping, ping, ping. Slow, methodical, relentless. It wasn't searching anymore. It was tracking, refining you 521's exact position with brutal precision. Each ping grew sharper, louder, closer. It wasn't sound. It was a countdown. The sonar operator finally broke. "They're correcting course again. Sir, they know our depth exactly." Another ping. "They're walking us." "What do you mean?" Barston asked. The operator swallowed. "They're herding us into a grid, a kill zone." Barston stared. This wasn't a ship hunt. It was behavior no U-boat officer had ever encountered. This was systematic eradication. The first leak. A sudden jet of cold seawater shot from a seam near the bow. Sharp, violent. The compartment erupted into motion as sailors grabbed rags, wedges, tools. Anything to slow the hiss of incoming water. The chief engineer cursed. "Pressure's killing the seals. Too deep." The captain's voice trembled for the first time. "Can you stop it?" "No, only slow it." Water was death in a submarine, not because of drowning, but because water weight increased descent. 521 grew heavier with every second. The depth gauge responded. 154 m, 155 m, 155.8 m, 156.4 m. Barston felt his pulse spike. If they hit 160 meters, the hull wouldn't survive. The destroyers began the box pattern. Above them, the hunters were repositioning, for destroyers moved into the corners of the square. The carriers stayed behind, coordinating. Barston recognized a maneuver from intelligence reports. The box pattern, a lethal trap used by the U.S. Navy. One destroyer pings. Another listens. A third drops charges. A fourth triangulates. And the carrier air wing confirms positions. No submarine had ever escaped a fully executed box pattern. Barston whispered, "God help you, ass. God help us." The attack begins. The fourth attack run was perfect. Too perfect. Charges detonated in a sequence that felt almost mathematical. Boom, 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 boom. Above, boom, 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 boom. Below, the submarine was trapped between explosions, crushed from both sides. U-521 lurched upward, then downward, then sideways as if the ocean itself was shaking in its fist. A fire broke out in the aft battery. Men screamed. Sparks rained from the ceiling. The captain grabbed Barston. "Report, report." Barston looked around at the chaos, opened his mouth, and had no words, because the truth was unspeakable. There was no report. There was only collapse, the shattering of morale. The bombardment ended. Silence returned. Not relief, not victory. The silence of nothing left to do. One sailor slumped to the floor. "We cannot escape. They are too many, too fast, too good." Another muttered, "This is not war anymore. This is butchery." The captain snapped, "Enough. We are U-boat men. We fight, we do not surrender." No one responded. Barston felt something terrifying. Not fear, not panic. Acceptance. Acceptance that Germany's undersea war had reached a point from which there was no return. The Americans were building ships faster than Germany could sink them. They were training crews faster than U-boats could kill them. They were deploying technology years ahead of what Germany expected. This wasn't the Battle of the Atlantic anymore. This was industrial extermination. Flashback. The old war versus the new war. Barston remembered 1941. A single destroyer meant danger. 2 meant retreat. 3 meant death. And carriers? Carriers never came near the mid-Atlantic. Carriers were too valuable. But now, the Americans had so many carriers. Small, fast, mass-produced escort carriers, that they used them like hammers. A symbol of something the officers whispered about. America is building a new navy every year, while Germany was losing 1 U-boat every 3 days. The tone that ended all hope. Ping. The sound echoed again, louder than before, but this time not from a destroyer. From above. The sonar had come from the air. Barston's eyes widened. Airborne sonar? Impossible. The operator nodded slowly. "No, sir, not impossible. American." The dread sank in. The U.S. Navy had developed sonobuoy networks far more advanced than German intelligence believed. The bomber above wasn't guessing their position. It had it exact. A voice crackled faintly across the hydrophone. English. Confident. Calm. Contact confirmed. Destroyer group. Prepare run. The operator removed the headphones as if burned. "Sir, they're coordinating over us. They can hear us. They're talking to each other through the ocean." The captain whispered, "Mein Gott." The 5th depth charge run, the one everyone feared. Then the ocean detonated. Boom, 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 boom. The submarine twisted violently. Light fixtures shattered. Oil sprayed across the control room. Men slammed into bulkheads. Barston struck the metal floor hard enough to see stars. A ripping, tearing sound echoed through the bow, like steel screaming. A leak burst open. Water flooded the forward compartment. Compartment 1 breach. Water intake critical. The submarine began to sink faster. 156 m. 157 m. 158 m. The engineer shouted. Hull at maximum pressure. We brake at 160. The boat creaked again. A massive groan, like an animal begging to die. Barston grabbed the rail and whispered, "We are already dead." But the captain shouted, "We are not dead until the sea takes US." The moment the crew understood, ping, 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 the sonar grew slower, more deliberate, more confident. The destroyers were not losing them. They were adjusting, perfecting, refining. The captain slumped into his chair, exhausted. How can they track us so quickly? Barston answered quietly, "Because, sir, they are not looking for ships anymore. They are looking for U-boats. Only U-boats." He looked around at the terrified faces of his men, and then he said the sentence that broke the room. "America has already won this war. We just haven't sunk yet." Silence. No one disagreed. The final pattern. The sixth depth charge run began with a silence so long, so heavy, that every man on U-521 thought the attack might finally be over. Then, boom! The first charge detonated directly above the conning tower. The submarine buckled. Pipes burst. The floor tilted sharply, throwing men into the bulkheads. A torpedo mechanic screamed, We're going down." The depth gauge leapt. 158 m, 158.8 m, 159.2 m, 159.7 m. Each number was a death sentence. Barston clenched his teeth until his jaw ached. Another explosion, worse than any before. The engineer roared. Hull failing. One more hit and we implode. The captain grabbed the nearest voice tube. His face was pale, not from fear, but from certainty. He had just realized there was no tactical solution. There was no maneuvering left, no evasion, no hiding. The Americans had too many ships, too many aircraft, too much sonar, too much industry. There was no battle happening above them. There was only procedure. The choice no U-boat captain wants to make. The captain looked around the cramped steel tomb that had become their world. Men shaking, water rising, steam leaking, the hull groaning, oxygen thinning, fear becoming something deeper. And he made the decision every submariner dreads. He whispered, "Prepare to surface." Barston stared in disbelief. "Surface? Sir, they'll destroy us." The captain replied softly, "They already have." He pointed at the flooding forward compartment. "At 160 meters, the hull will kill us in seconds. Up there, at least we have minutes." Barston felt the weight of the moment. Going up meant being gunned down. Staying down meant being crushed alive. But the captain was right. One death was certain. The other, slightly less so. "Blow ballast," he ordered quietly. "Take us up." The ascent into enemy hands. The submarine groaned as the ballast tanks filled with air. It rose slowly, painfully, its hull screeching against the pressure. Men held onto rails and pipes, bracing for one last explosion. But it didn't come. The destroyers had paused. Because they knew. They had tracked the submarine perfectly. They knew exactly where it would surface. And they were waiting. The surface where hope should be. U-521 broke through the Atlantic like a dying whale, the conning tower erupting from the water amidst foam and smoke. Rain hammered the deck. Cold air rushed into the submarine vents. The hatch blew open and fresh, but terrifying, light poured inside. The captain climbed first, then Barston, then the others. They emerged into a nightmare. The 5 ships that ended a war. 5 American destroyers sat in a perfect half-circle around U-521, guns trained, searchlights pointed, engines humming in a rhythm that felt mechanical, inevitable. Behind them, towering above the waves, was the escort carrier, not massive, not imposing, but symbolic, the physical embodiment of American industry. One destroyer fired a single warning shell, splashing water beside the submarine. Then a voice boomed over loudspeaker. "German submarine. Abandoned ship." Barston looked at the captain. "That's mercy." The captain shook his head. "No, that is confidence." The order no one expected. The captain closed his eyes for a moment. Then he gave his final order. Scuttle the boat. The engineering crew moved automatically. Explosive charges were set. Valves opened. Systems flooded. Barston stood on the conning tower as his submarine, his home, filled with water. He watched the Atlantic swallow everything. The hull, the deck gun mount, the periscope, the emblem he had painted himself. The place where 50 men had fought, feared, hoped. U-521 sank beneath the waves without a sound, not destroyed by enemy fire, but drowned by a truth too large to ignore. The moment Barston understood, the American destroyers lowered boats to pick up survivors. Barston sat shivering under a wool blanket, staring at the escort carrier as it loomed closer. It wasn't the gun barrels. It wasn't the aircraft. It wasn't the spotlights. It was something else. It was quantity. It was scale. It was industry. Germany was still building submarines one at a time in cluttered shipyards. America was building entire navies. Barston whispered, "Wir haben eine Chance gehabt." We never had a chance. Epilogue. The war Germany could not see. Barston survived the war. Years later, he visited an American naval museum where an escort carrier, sister to the one that hunted him, was displayed. He touched its cold steel plating. A tour guide asked, "Are you a veteran?" Barston nodded. "Yes, of the losing side." The guide, not understanding, laughed kindly. But Barston wasn't joking. He finally understood. Germany did not lose the Atlantic to bravery, tactics, or heroism. Germany lost because America built 122 escort carriers. America built 563 destroyer escorts. America built 270,000 aircraft. America built more ships in 1 year than Germany built in an entire war. The ocean was no longer ruled by skill. It was ruled by output. And U-521 had been one of the last submarines to discover that truth the hard way.